Hey y'all, welcome back to another tutorial walkthrough where I'll be showing you how I painted my man. But first, here's a disclaimer. This is not the holy grail of how to paint a portrait. I'm just showing you how I paint my portrait and hopefully it will help you out. So we're starting with the Artist Loft Level 3 14 by 14 canvas. Jumping right into the reference picture where I'm using a RCA home theater projector to make sure that there's accuracy scaling onto the canvas. Next, I'm going in with a mechanical pencil, nothing special, just to kind of hone in on those details and define every feature. Next, I'm going to lock it in with a Krylon fixative so that there's no smears with the sketch. All right, let's jump into my favorite products. So this is a Gamsol solvent, which we will be using oils, but if you are an acrylics painter, this will act as a soluble agent, aka a water for your oils. I love using the brand Master's Touch, which you can find at Hobby Lobby. So I'm going in with the primary colors as well as a burnt sienna and burnt umber. For my magic wands, I'm using the brand Aroic Nylon brushes, which you can find on Amazon, yet I'm starting with the largest filbert style brush. I like to blend my colors onto my canvas, so what I do is pack my brush with the paint first and then start blending. I feel like this excites the eyes more than having an already pre-made flat color. To properly achieve this vibrant turquoise that I also love, I'm going in with a lake green and blending it with some of that yellow, brown, and black for the background. The background is going to be soft and subtle, muting out some of those shapes so that the focal point can be the portrait itself. Studying my husband's overall complexion, I will be using the burnt sienna as my base hue. And as you can see, I'm using some of that burnt umber to black for the edge of his head, and then going in with some undertones of red. The beauty of a filbert brush is that you can blend and define at the same time with the round edges. So here I'm going in with a smaller filbert brush to start getting into those nicks and crannies of the features. I always say you want to study your portrait as a puzzle piece. Focus on one segment at a time. Do not get overwhelmed by trying to fill in the whole face with one color. Your face has different hues within each segment. For the eyebrows, I'm just blending in a tinge of black into the skin color, which I'll go back to define the hair follicles in the next layer. Next, I'm jumping to my liner brush, which is going to help me get into the details and the lines of the eyes. With this first layer, you're just basically color blocking in the colors that you see on your reference photo. You want to make sure that you have your reference photo near you at all times because that exercises and perfects you to have a keen eye on accuracy. With his eyes, I'm going in with a burnt sienna, which I'm focusing on the pupils first, and then I will fill in the whites of the eyes afterwards. Just like a coloring book, you want to make sure that you're using the sketch as a guidance tool on where the wrinkles are, where the unique features stop and start. Putting this into place first helps mold the rest of the segments together. So these are the four that I keep in rotation in my hand at all times so that they can be on standby. But here we are starting with the smallest liner brush to get into them chiclets, okay? We are about to start defining teeth. Now don't be afraid of teeth. I'm gonna show you the secret. Here I'm just using a little bit of red, yellow, and titanium white to get the base color of the tongue. And then, not to lose the shape of each tooth, I'm going in with a little bit of grayish black. Now this works great for the oils. This would not work so well with acrylics. You don't want them looking like they got gaps all between their teeth. But this is going to blend perfectly once we start adding that off-white, which you see me doing now. Now I'm purposely going in with off-white and a little bit of reflection of that pink into each tooth, because once we get into the next layer with adding a pure white or a flat white, On the edge of each tooth, it's going to just balance it perfectly, which makes the tooth look more natural and not look like flat little white squares. Now let's get into this grill, okay? If you're from Texas, then you already know. No, but I'm starting off with a lined black and then filling in with a yellow and a tinge of orange. Now we're going to apply that same puzzle method to the hand, and we're going to get into the next day. So bam, I'm starting off with my Fantastic Four, and this time I am lifting the tones with a very vibrant orange. This is where dimension starts to really come into effect. And so with this technique is called stippling. It's just a very patting pattern that mixes the previous layer within the top layer together. The previous layer is cured enough to stay put, but sticky enough to have that overlapping layer really blend well together. Unlike acrylics, baby, once that first layer is dry, it's dry. Within this stage, I am still doing a lot of dry brushing, just feathering in that paint into the previous layer. Now let's jump into these hair follicles. I am taking the liner brush and I have dipped it into the solvent. I make sure that this brush is very wet so that it glides seamlessly across the canvas. Do away with the thick parentheses as eyebrows and make sure you're actually adding detail. Next, let's jump into the eyes itself. This is what brings eyes to life. Just a pure white dot on each pupil for the light source and a glimmer of sparkle against that eyelid. Anytime you have to use the liner brush, I always recommend more solvent than paint, because this really helps get those details intact. For his wrinkle folds, I'm adding just a light source down the middle of his nose, which this works well with any continuous pattern, such as clothes folds, water. You just want to make sure that light source is continuous down the middle until it fades out. Next, we're going to use that same technique that we did for the eyebrows for the eyelashes. More solvent than paint, using the smallest liner brush. Here I'm being very strategic on where his eyelashes are growing. You don't want them sticking straight up. You really want to imitate how they grow. I'm still applying that stippling technique to bring out some of the texture of the skin, and then also lifting some of that dimension with more highlights. Within this stage, it's just going back and really defining those areas that you laid within the first foundation. Going back over and deepening those features with more hues. All right, so let's get into defining the mouth. At this point, I'm using strictly a liner brush, even for the blending. For inside the cheeks, I'm going in with a titanium white mixed with crimson red and lining the lips with a bit of burnt sienna. In the same technique that we use for the hair follicles, you want to make sure that you're using that for the lining of the teeth. More solvent than paint. This will help truly define and detail the crevices of each tooth. Here I'm just going in and adding shadows underneath the teeth to bring the teeth forth. And the same details apply for the molars in the back. As far as the grill, I'm going in and defining with a bit of a burnt umber, followed by the yellow medium to really make this grill pop. So I'm intently studying the reference picture to make sure I am accurately adding in wherever the light is hitting the grill. The perfect way to achieve gold is always to include black, brown, yellow, white, and orange. Here I'm just stippling in some more facial texture to the chin and adding some of that peach fuzz under the lip. At this point, I'm sure you've probably mastered the hair follicles. For his reflective overtone, I'm glazing in some bright oranges before we get to the highlights of yellow and beige. And now I'm jumping back to really define that mouth just a little bit more with some taste buds before we wrap up for the day. As you can see, it's starting to become sunset, and I only like to work in natural light. So let's jump into day 3. Now this is the point of glazing. I love a good glaze, okay? Because that's where the details and intricacies start to come into play. With hard lines against a contrasting background really brings forth an element. It just gives your portrait a boldness and vibrancy about itself. And as I fill in the suit, you can also see me adding in a hard line of shadow just to bring forth that hand. Some stippling effect for texture of the suit. And I know I jumped ahead of myself, but this is formally known as glazing, taking most solvent, less paint, and lightly adding in subtle details. Here is my paint palette. As you can see, I have been mixing a plethora of colors. At this point, I'm just adding some finishing touches, looking back on my reference to make sure I'm not missing any distinct details. Now, I ain't no hyper realistic artist, okay? Don't be coming for my neck. I truly just enjoy my style. So for me, this is good enough. I'm wrapping up with painting my edges. You want to make sure them edges is laid, okay? They're not naked, they gotta be painted. I use Master's Touch acrylic, and here's my final masterpiece. That's my man, my man. Thank y'all for tuning in. I hope y'all enjoyed.